Sige. So, while waiting for others, magsugod na to sa discussion. Okay na? Makita ninyo ang PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Sige. So, mag-start ta sa atong discussion. So, last meeting, dirita sa manata ni mga basic principles, and then manata sa aning definition, including the purpose, kining whole project cycle, role sa EIA, tapos nataani, and then kining process, including kining mga categories, mga types of projects, mga groupings nila. And I think ni-end dire. Yeah. Kining list of environmentally critical area. So, kapag reminder lang ha, na in terms of grouping, naastay upat ka category or basically upat ka groups. Sa ang category A na to, those environmentally critical projects, maski ibutang siya sa non-environmentally critical area or environmentally critical area, or so required na sila og EIA. Another is for those projects na considered as category B. So category B sila if they are, even though dili sila environmentally critical project, pero when they are placed in an environmentally critical area, so required na sila mag-submit og EIA. So EIS, Environmental Impact Statement. So unsa day ang mga categories under sa environmentally critical area? Anong kuan ni siya ha? So mo ni siya. So this list are referring to those area which we classify as environmentally critical. So whatever projects na ma-under mga ibutang or will be established in any of these locations, so automatic na sila, required na sila o EIA. Okay? Areas declared by laws such as national parks. So tanan all those areas na naa sa RA 7586 katong naipas law. So appeal na sila dira. Areas set aside by aesthetic potential and tourist spot. So, areas which constitute habitat for endangered or wildlife threatened Philippine wildlife. So kana siya. Areas with unique archaeological, geological areas with traditionally occupied by ICCs. Areas frequently visited by hard hit or calamities. And then areas with critical slope, areas classified as prime agricultural land, recharge areas of aquifers, water bodies, mangrove areas, and coral reefs. Okay? So whatever project, whether a project is environmentally critical or not, so if they are stationed in any of these locations, automatically they are required to submit an EIS. Okay, so what are the basic parts of a typical EIA report? Sige. So, ito na yung basahon. So, the first is the project description. Cesar. Nakada, Cesar?
Yes, sir.
Basahan daw ang definition kung sa ang naa sa project description.
Project description, including its location, scale, and duration, rationale, alternatives, phases and components, resource requirements, manpower complement, estimate of waste generation from most critical project activities, and environmental aspects, project costs.
Okay, thank you, Cesar. So that's it ha. That's clear ha. Unsay mga important informations that should be divulged by the proponent there is a project description. Okay? So nakaisa-isa na sila na mga or even more. Okay? Dili ni siya maong limit, murag mao lang ni ang mga minimum requirements na dapat ma-divulge. But if there are other information na which will be critical for the project or critical might have an influence with the environmental state sa area. So dapat i-add sila. Okay, minimum requirements lang, minimum na information lang ni sila. So it doesn't delimit here. Okay, so klaro man to kung unsay dapat sulod sa project description. Another is a baseline environmental description. Sige, Ivy. Asa daw ni Ivy?
Baseline environmental description of the land, water, air, and people.
Focus on the sectors and resources most significantly affected by the proposed action.
Yan. So, thank you, Ivy. So, ang baseline environmental description, dire, musunod siya after project description because here, you would provide all the data sets sa current conditions site. If ang site is wala pa gigamit, okay? Dapat before man siya, before man ang EIS na i-prepare na document. So, if wala pa gigamit, unsay current condition sa site. So, all those na mga information like diversity. So, naabay trees na present. Sila ang diversity sa trees na present. Isa nga mga species ang present. So, if there are water bodies. So, asa dapit ang source ana o asa padulong ang effluent ana, I mean ang mouth sa kana nga water body. Okay, asa padulong ang tubig ana. So, if ever na naman na siya chance nga maka-affect sa 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 other areas, considering na connected na siya with other areas. So most probably dapat so therefore the data set should be clearly stated there is a baseline environmental description. You cannot proceed sa tree without fully acquiring the exhaustively acquired all the data sets there is a baseline environmental description. Mo ni ang pinakatrabaho so actually. Although sometimes ang misconception po sa mga siguro sa mga EIA na student or kwan, most of their time diri gatuyok sa baseline environmental descriptions. Baga kay lang EIS na document ang nakabaga ato ang baseline environmental description. It's actually a mistake, okay? Dili kini ang dapat ang pinakabaga nga page nimo is kining impact assessment and environmental management plan. So not the baseline environmental description. There is second part. You just only divulge all the important information sa current status sa location. And as stated here, focused on sectors and resources most significantly affected by the proposed actions. Okay? So, dili necessary nga naagid tanan. Dili necessary nga na daghan gyud og i-appeal na information like for example, ang project gibutang sa Mount Kitanglad. So therefore, ang imong i-assess ang community, for example, nga involved lang is katong mga directly associated sa kana nga area. Like for example, mga indigenous people, mga trabahante sa any activities therein diya sa area. Okay, local government. So kana lang ang mga social scope. Dili na ka moadto for example sa Mount Kitanglad ang project, mag-interview pa kag mga estudyante diri sa CMU. So layo na kayo na. So, di na directly connected dito sa project site gyud. So, sa baseline environmental description, you only get those relevant data na that would lead you to produce a good impact assessment and environmental management plan because you cannot do the 3 and 4 without these two. Okay, without a thorough data set there is a 2, you cannot project the 3 and produce the 4. Sige, next impact assessment. Si Trisha. Trisha,
Sir,
basaha ang impact assessment.
impact assessment focused on significant environmental impacts in relation to decommissioning stages, taking into account cumulative, unavoidable, and residual impacts.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Trisha. So, ato. So, sa impact assessment, what the data set that you are, I mean, not the data set, the information that should be given in this impact assessment is based on your baseline environmental description. Okay, pag mo dire focus on significant environmental impact, katong puruhan, katong dako gyud chance nga mahitabo. Okay, dili ka pod mo butang og something nga murag impossible na siya nga mahitabo nga impact. Okay? And all the impacts na naa dire should be from the construction phase until dito sa decommissioning. Okay, plan man siya. Okay, what would ang construction meaning at this stage what would be the impact sa project? Impact niya sa biodiversity, impact niya with the soil,
and other natural resources, including the community, during sa construction phase. So another, unsa impact niya during construction and development, operation, and decommissioning. Okay? So decommissioning meaning if i-abandon na ang project. If mahuman na, magsirado na ang kumpanya. So dili na pwede magsira sila, ilalambiyaan diretso. Mamurag gabiya lang o kuting di sa kuan na you cannot just simply left the project without proper conducting a decommissioning ng mga activities, meaning dapat na walay mga possible impacts na kaya niya mahitabo during even during abandonment. Okay? So for example, if ang project is ga-produce og toxic waste. So if naay toxic of naamoy gina-develop nga naay toxic waste nga gina-produce ang isa ka industry and then nag-abandon sila, katong mga toxic waste na na-produce nila dapat ila tong properly dispose. Dili pwede nga murag basta lang biyaan. Kay if na ever naay accidents nga mahitabo or naay something nga makakos og dagko nga issue, so amanubag katong proponent. Okay? So ang impact assessment, you are trying to project unsa to ang mga possible nga environmental impact. Katong posible ra gyud. So katong what are the possible environmental impact during the construction, development, operation, and decommissioning. Ano may ko nga katong puruhan. For example, naa kay project. Let's say katong example na to atong mga niagi pinihan gyapon. So naka-plante pineapple plantation na project. Tapos ang impact nimo ningon ka nga tungod ani nga project maglinog. That's impossible, di ba? So layo ra kay na sa tinuod. So dapat all your identified impact sa kana nga project should be evidence-based. Okay? Evidence-based siya. With this current condition, as stated there is a baseline environmental description, these are the impact na possible na hitabo because of the undertaking. So last part is the environmental management plan. Okay. Sige. Basa daw Erica.
Mitigation plan, areas of public information, proposal, environmental monitoring plans with multi-sectoral public participation for EIS-based projects and the corresponding institutional and financial requirements or arrangements.
So thank you. So sa EMP, this is your expected na mo ni ang thickest na portion sa inyong EIA. Okay? Kaya dapat ang pinakabaga. Here, as you've identified kung unsa to ang mga possible impact na na-identify diri sa third, you will develop here the mga interventions. So the interventions can be a mitigation plan. Itong kuhan ka gani, katong example, katong tulo ka buk atong niagi ha, is either a enhancement, a prevention, or a mitigation. So either anang tulo. Although all we wanted is prevention. Prevention yun. But sometimes dili man good ma-compromise if prevention siya na ay something nga mawala sa system sa isa ka operation sa isa ka industry, so dili sila ka operate. So that's why we go to the alternative na mitigation at least, and then enhancement. So mao na to imong ipambutang dire. So in the environmental management plan, you state here so unsa ang mga impacts and how you are going to address that impact, including the budgetary allocation, no, financial requirements and arrangement. So including the budgetary requirements, unsaon nimo pag-address ana nga certain impact. Okay? Dili pod maayo na if ever ga-assess ka og project and then na-identify kag impact, nagbutang ka og dagko kayo nga financial requirements. Like for example, bansuhan ang project and then nagsuggest ka og enhancement, for example, para dili magkatag ang mga basura, ang mga sawdust, kuan nimo for example, i-aircon mo ang suggestion, i-aircon ang kuan and then para close tanan, walay mo gawas nga mga sawdust, and then ang financial requirements say 50 million.
Pero bansuhan ra ang project. So gamay kayo ang project, dako kay ka og financial requirement. So that's wrong. Okay, dapat appropriate pod ang imong environmental management plan dito sa mga risk na na-identify nato or dito sa mga impacts na na-identify nato in this third part. Okay? So inana siya ha. So project description, you describe the project, you divulge all the information kung unsa ang about ang project, what are the processes involved, what are the activities therein. Then second, baseline environmental description, sa current grade, you answer kung unsay current status sa site. Impact assessment, of course, you identify the possible impacts, and then environmental management plan will give an intervention, including its financial budget. Intervention on how you are going to address the impacts na na-identify. Kuha ninyo ang typical EIA report na parts. Sabtan ninyo? Question? Question? Is there anyone? Some more question? About si Cesar.
Wala, sir.
Okay, sige. So, kung sabtan ninyo niya. And then, so, the EIA review and issuance, ECC issuance is vested only sa DNR. Walay other government agency na gi-assign in relation with the environmental impact assessment or the implementation of PEISS, walay laing government agency ang gi-allow ang gi-assign na mag-manage na other than the DNR. Okay? So therefore, all the EIA reports na na-prepare niyo should be submitted to the DNR, particularly the Environmental Management Bureau. They also are the ones who has the authority to conduct review and evaluation. Okay? So review and evaluation is the function of DNR. And then environmental compliance certificates are issued only by the President of the Philippines or his duly authorized representatives, which is the DNR. Okay? So sometimes, dili mo ko dalo na dito sa pinakataas. Labi na kung dili kayo na nakalakuha ang project. So even the DNR secretary already can sign the environmental compliance certificate. Okay? Only the DNR ha, wala lang government agency. Oh, but some other government agency will require the EIA as part of their requirements. Yeah. Okay, so look at this table. This is the summary table of projected groups, EIA report types, decision documents, processing, deciding authorities, and processing duration. So, project groups, di ba? Nato group 1, group 2, group 3. Okay? And then I certain areas, environmentally critical area, non-environmentally critical area, and non-environmentally critical projects in non-environmentally critical area. Okay? So, let's start with the projected groups 1 to ABC. If the project is new, nakabutang dire, meaning bago lang siya, maupay pa, wala pa natukod, wala pa existing na building, bare pa ang area, mo apply lang din sila sa EIA. So they belong in a category 1A. Those projects that are existing projects for modification or restart up, they are of another category. Okay? Na existing projects, meaning na building, existing na ang facility, ongoing na operations, they are in need of modification, for example. So, sa category, and then those projects, those 1C, group 1C, na operating without ECC. Na ka-exist ni sila nga mga certain industry, ka-operate without environmental compliance certificate. So, they are considered as applied to as single projects, and then as a requirement, katong new projects, they are required to submit an environmental impact statement.
existing project for modification or restart up, they are required to submit an environmental performance report and management plan. And those projects, 1C, that are operating without ECC, they are required to submit an environmental performance report and management plan. Okay? So, decision document. So, unsa ilang ihatag sa DNR if masatisfy si DNR with this mga documentation nga gi-submit sa proponent. So, of course, ECC. Okay? So, processing responsibility, of course, the EMB, Environmental Management Bureau, deciding authority, either the EMB director or the DNR secretary, and then ang mga time allocation sa preparation. So, if you happen to see, pila no, 90 days, meaning halos 3 months ng approval. Next. Yan yung mga non-environmentally critical projects in environmentally critical area. So, in the same way, nagyapon na to. So, new, it can be a group 2A, new, group 2B, group 2B is existing projects for modification or restart up, and 2C are operating without ECC. Okay, remember how these are non-environmentally critical project, but kibutang ang project sa environmentally critical area. So, mga requirements. For new projects, they're required to submit environmental compliance impact statement, initial environmental examination report, initial environmental examination checklist, and project description. The project description report. So, for the case of Group 2B, they are required to submit environmental performance report and management plan, and this Group 2C, they are required to submit this EPRMP. Of course, the decision document is ECC, which shall be facilitated by the RO EIA MD chief, okay, of the DNR. This other information na adere sa summary table, ini silang na adere, are just same dere, but naalay mga unique like kining Group 3 A2. So they are new projects. Ang Group 3 na to, non-environmentally critical projects. Okay? In non-environmentally critical sira, gibutang pagyod sa non-environmentally critical area. So they can be an A1 or an A2. And the requirements is project description report and project description report option of proponent. And what they will receive is if nakita na review na okay sila, so they will be given a certificate of non-coverage, meaning they are not covered by the PIESS na policy. Okay? Tagaan man sila CNC, o certificate of non-coverage. Question? Erica? Ivy? May? Shani? Trisha? Wait, nadunggan ko din yun?
Sir?
Yeah, kuta na kayo. Na may question? Question? Nan?
Wala ko so far, sir.
How about ang uban? Erica, Ivy, May, Shihani.
Wala, sir.
Wala, sir.
Sige. Be familiar ani nga table ha. Dapat kabalo mo ani nga table. Familiar ninyo unsa ni nga mga details nga naa diri. Ang grouping, and then if ang case for example kay new project siya nga naa sa group 2. So unsa ang ilang mga requirement. So naa diri unsa ang mga requirement dahil unsa ang ihatag ni DNR as a proof if they have complied. Okay, let's proceed. So, kini, is just a continuation sa katong mga katong table. So, just go over sa kini nga table so that ma-familiarize niyo. So an ECC or Environmental Compliance Certificate is issued as a certificate of environmental compliance commitment to which the proponent or an owner's project conforms with after DNR-EMB explains the ECC conditions. Conforms with after DNR-EMB explains the ECC conditions. Meaning, ihatag lang ang ECC if na-satisfy ni proponent si DNR. At the same time, whatever impacts nga nakita because of their projects na address nila, and they are committed na ila tong i-implement kato nga management plan, environmental management plan. Okay? So, if ang isa ka project is dili siya mabilong sa EIA nga system, like katong naa sa group 3, di ba? Mga non-environmentally critical projects, gibutang pagid sa non-environmentally critical area. So okay ra. So they are not required to submit any documents, but they are required to submit actually this project description report, and then the DNR would provide them a certificate of non-coverage, stating that they are not under the scope of EIA. If ever wala na satisfy si DNR, kita ni DNR na kulang ang inyong EIA, wala mo niagi sa process or whatever, you will be given a denial letter. Okay? And then in the denial letter, the DNR will explain the disapproval of the application and guidance on how the applications can be improved to a level of acceptability in the next EIA process. Okay? Kaya ni, sabtan ninyo? Hello? Wala mo sila. Erika, Ivy, Shani, na mo dia?
Yes, sir.
Sige, nasabtan to niyo na may question na ni.
None so far, sir.
Sa ganito ihatag, for example, ang project kay group 3. Unsa ilang i-submit?
CNC, sir, Certificate of Non-Coverage.
No, ang i-submit nila project description. Okay? Ang i-submit man nila, ang i-submit sa proponent project description. I-evaluate din to ni DNR, and then si DNR ang mo issue sa certificate of non-coverage. Okay, na siya ha. Familiarize ninyo ha sa mga requirements if kana ang status sa project. So, unsa yung mga parts sa environmental compliance certificate or sa ECC? So the first, di lang na siya isa ka page ha. The first part of ECC is the certificate of environmental compliance commitment signed by the proponent, which parang in the same way telling na they are committed sa pag-implement sa project and they will really follow kung unsa tong environmental standards na naa sa ilang environmental management plan. Okay? So, a certificate of environmental compliance commitment. Man ang first page. The second part is the Annex A of ECC, which lists the conditions within the mandate of EMB. So, nakastipulate yun na dito. Unsa tong ang mga dapat niya i-implement. And then, third part sa imong environmental compliance certificate is the Annex B of the ECC, which lists the EIA review committee's recommendation to the proponent, as well as suggestion to the government agency and LGUs who have mandates over the project so that they can integrate the EIA findings into their decision-making process. It's very clear. Third, validity. Okay, your ECC remains valid and active for the lifetime of the project, meaning from the if na-awardan na, active na nga ECC from the construction phase, during operation, and even during abandonment. So, whole lifetime sa project, active ang ECC. So, the ECC automatically expires. Okay? Ma-expire siya if ang project will not be implemented within 5 years. Guard, kuha ka karon. Kuha ka sa karon 2022. Kuha ka ECC na award. Pero ang imong project tukod pa nimo 2030 pa. So wala na to ikuan, wala na to kining validity. Okay? Your ECC will be automatically expire if dili na nimo ma-implement ang project within that 5 years. Another, if the baseline characteristics have significantly changed to the extent that the impact assessment is embodied on the environmental management plan. So when you say the baseline characteristics have significantly changed, for example, nakay project na itukod sa isa ka area. Karon, pila ka nakahuman nakakandak og baseline information, mo nang gibutan sa imong document, sa imong EIS na document. However, pagkatapos ang mga pila ka adlaw, katong area nga inyong giadtuan naglandslide. So meaning, may tabuan na medyo dili na lahi na ang ground level, lahi na ang mga certain mga conditions sa site which might result nga pautruhon ng EIA. Okay? Especially if katong pamigi na significantly change ang condition sa area before na implement ang project or during sa implementation sa project. Automatically mo expire si EIA ana. So like nagka-landslide, nagka-flash flood. So sa una, diya nga murag islet tunga, for example, tunga sa Cagayan de Oro River, may gamay nga outlet test tunga, pwede gitukuran pa to sa una og real estate. Daw bay katong na Yolanda. Sendong ba to? Yeah, Sendong. Pagka Sendong, na wash out katong area. So automatically ang condition sa site lahi na sa pagkakaroon. So dili na pud to safe puyan. So that's why if naagaling if katunga in the katunga real estate mo padayon, then they shall produce another ECC. Can it change man ang condition sa area? Okay. So public participation. So si kuan. Si Hani.
Sir.
Basa daw tanan kini na adto sa
Public participation in the EIA process. Public participation shall be demonstrated through the following activities. First is social preparation process. Second is public scoping, conduct of the EIA study, public hearing, GAS and LGU's decision-making process, and post-ECC multi-sectoral validation.
Okay, thank you, si Hani. So what is stated here is that since public participation is actually very important sa EIA. So motong kan nga inclusive dapat ang EIA. So pag wala ka na-implement ng public participation, no na gid si EMB ana. Okay? In all levels of the EIA preparation, dapat na ay component dito sa public participation. Nganong important siya? During kining mga activities like social preparation process. So therefore, ang atunin mo ang mga tao. Public scoping. Ang public scoping, kaingon mo sa mga tao unsa ang project, unsa inyong mga nakita nga mga himog epekto sa project, and sa ila pong point of view sa mga tao, unsa epekto sa project. So naay dialogue na may tabo, magka-exchange of information. So inana nga kay tabo sa public nga scoping. Another is the conduct of EIA study. So important po that public participation should be involved there sa EIA nga conduction. Public hearing, government agency and local government units decision-making process. Okay? Before mo say yes si other agencies, kung nakakay permit nga gikuha sa ila or si LGU, dapat undergo sa public consultation, including the post-ECC multi-sectoral validation. So all these activities should be continued sa isa ka working na industry para dili sila mo ma-issuean og mga cease and desist order or para dili ma-cancel ang ilang ECC. Okay? go to the typical part of the EIA process. Okay, so this is the this is the short overview kung unsay mahitabo during EIA application. Okay? I-concept na to ang legend. All these yellow are proponent driven, meaning ang manguna ani ang tag-iya sa project kisa tong magtukod ang ni-apply. Then this dark yellow nga color, this should be headed by the DNR. So DNR ang mangulo ani nga mga stages. Then proponent driven but outside the EIA process required as requirements are under the mandate of other agencies. Okay? Kini proponent driven, meaning si tag-iya sa project manguha siya aning mga clearances to other government agency. And then blue meaning naka-scope siya, naka-arrow in all levels, which highlights na ang public involvement should be part in these major activities that is being done during the EIA preparation. Okay? Dili pwede nga magkuhan ng tao, huwag mong kabalong nga naaday gitukod nga chemical company diya. Uy, wala ko kabalong nga naaday gitukod diya, naigo mi sa among balay. Kuralan mig apil. So because that would become a problem later on. So mao nang since ang unang reklamo mo ang tao. So mao na that's why important na in all levels of the EIA process, ga-consult gyud na public na consultation. Okay? Sige, let's look at the sequence. Mag-start sa dire. Mag-cancel na akong pan. Guys, mag-cancel na ang akong kining 40 minutes na Zoom. Maghatag ko ninyo og new link. So ato nang tiwason din yung PowerPoint. Pag-aantang og another na link ha. Okay, Ivy, ano mo dia? Ivy, Erika, and then Jihan. Kamu orang gyapon ako. Okay na? Kita na ninyo ang PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go over sa steps nga kakitabo during the EIA process. So first, foremost, there is a project, katong project conceptualization. Then, during that stage, sa conceptualization, you will evaluate whether your project is under the scope of EIA or not. If not under the scope of EIA, then wala na ka din. Naka-proceed. Diretso na ka dire. Kani mga other permits nga kinahanglan nimo from the other government agency. But if you are required to produce the EIA, so dire ka nga step. So EIA required, then therefore conduct the EIA study, including the scoping. So unsa na sila nga mga activities, makita na to later. Then EIA study report preparation by the project proponent as a requirement for ECC application. After that, submit nimo, i-review and evaluate ang EIA sa DNR EMB. Then possibly i-deny. I-deny siya. If ma-deny, so you have an option nga i-change nimo ang project plan or mag-relocate ka. Ngita ka other locations nga dili kayo critical para ensure nimo nga ma-approve gid imong project. If during evaluation nakita nga okay, pasar ni. So mo issue sila og ECC with the recommendations to other entities with mandate on the project. After that, you can use this ECC na to apply to other mga government agencies nga mga permits and clearances. Then you can now implement the project, and during implementation, all the environmental impact monitoring and evaluation and audit shall be conducted. So what happens here, there is happening environmental impact monitoring and evaluation audit. Gina-determine if imo bag yung gi-implement all those interventions nga imong gi-state sa imong environmental management plan. So during implementation. Okay? if you decide nga, okay, mag-expand ta. So, if mag-expand ka, then you proceed diri sa expansion and project modifications, then you go back to the process of EIA preparation. Okay, maski expansion na siya. So, required yapon siya mag-EIA. And at all levels, required ang public participation. Okay? Meaning, from this stage until even during a stage, dapat na-enroll ang public. So, day ang kakay ani. Sige. So, during the screening na stage, kinidere sa taas niya, screening. During the screening na stage, you are trying to determine if your project is covered or not by the PEISS. If a project is covered, then screening further determines what document type the project should prepare to secure the needed approval and what the rest of the requirements are in terms of the EMB Office of Application endorsing and decision authorities and duration and processing. Okay? After that, you conduct scoping. After, if makita ninyo sa screening na kinahanglan ta mag-EIA, these are the requirements nga dapat nato buhaton. After that, proceed ka sa scoping. Kasi ka tabo sa scoping. Erica, basaha daw.
Scoping is a proponent-driven, multi-sectoral formal process of determining the focus terms of reference of the EIA study. Scoping identifies the most significant issues, impacts of a proposed project, and then delimits the extent of baseline information to those necessary, then delimits to evaluate and mitigate the impacts. The need for and scope of an environmental risk assessment is also done during the scoping session. Scoping is done with the local community through public scoping and with a third party EIA review committee through technical scoping, both with the participation of the DENR EMB. The process results in a signed formal scoping checklist by the review team with final approval by the EMB chief.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Erica. So, kato, scoping ha. And this happens, katutanan na, kung libasa ni Erica, this happens not just once. Okay, several levels ang agian ani sa scoping na process. I think na 3 levels na scoping. Sa scoping, i-introduce nimo ang project with all those stakeholders. You try to explain kung unsa ang project, unsa ang risk na involved sa project, unsa mga details about the project, and then you talk with the stakeholders. Sila po, mo identify po sila unsa possible na impact sa inyong project. And then you will identify asa lang dito ang katong necessary na impact nga ma-mitigate. Posible man gud daghang manggawas na impacts na soil erosion, loss of biodiversity, impact to kining river basin, and among others. Pero sobra na dai ka ito, wala na gito siya, dili na to directly dili na to inana ka strong ang influence sa project sa kato nga mga impacts. So there is a scoping, i-develop ninyo ang kining what we call as terms of reference, or TOR. Ang terms of reference is like murag kasabutan na siya, kasabutan between the proponent and the stakeholders, identifying kung unsa to ang mga dapat environmental, unsa to dapat ang mga impact na naa sa imong what we call this, naa sa imong environmental management plan. Okay? Unsa lang nga mga what are those mga impacts that should be addressed by the proponent. Okay? So i-develop na niyo ang terms of reference. It's an agreement, therefore dili si proponent ang magbuot sa terms of reference. Okay, kini lang nga impact akong gusto i-address kanang uban ayaw na. So that's wrong. Dili pod si public, kay kung si public daghan kay na sila i-identify nga impact, which might result nga ay kung ako si proponent di na lang ko mo dayon anak ay daghan kay kung kinahanglan i-address nga impact, gasto kayo for my case. So that's why this should be a discussion between the proponent and all the stakeholders. Na say stakeholders, community,
government agencies, LGUs, etc. Tanan nga involved sa projects, mga direct na stakeholders. Okay? Ito siya ha. And then ang katong output ninyo na terms of reference, that would be reviewed by the DNR EMB also. I-review ni DNR kung katubang mga output ninyo during scoping kay valid. Okay, kay basig gasabot-sabot ra mo. So that would be a problem. Ay, sabot-sabot ra mo sa katong mga community, bayaran na lang ta mo nana. So dapat i-review na siya ni DNR na maugid niya ang nasabutan ninyo na with the community and klaro siyang sabot. So, ang scoping. After that, you conduct the EIA study and report preparation. So, EIA study, therefore, prepare na nimo ang EIS na document acquiring all the baseline information, then preparation of your katong environmental impact assessment, and then your environmental monitoring plan. And then, you submit that EIA or EIS na document dito sa DNR. So, review of EIA during this time, it normally entails an EMB procedural screening for compliance to minimum requirements specified during scoping, followed by a substantive review to either compose third-party expert commissioned by the EMB to review the EIA. Okay? So EMB evaluates the EIRC recommendations and the public inputs during public consultations hearing in the process of recommending a decisions on the application. So ang approval po ni DNR dili lang po base sa ila na una sa DNR lang na sole. Mayroon si DNR ay ganahan ani ayo ni i-approve dili nana. So they will require tap an experts, group of experts as evaluator sa project, and at the same time ila po nang i-consult sa public. Okay? Ikuan po nila sa public. So katong mga recommendations based sa katong mga technical experts na gi-commission sa EMB, including the public inputs during public consultation process, will be the basis kung i-recommend ba nila for a approval or not sa kana nga certain project. Okay, that's what happens during this time. Next level is decision making. So diri sa decision making level, it involves the evaluation of EIA recommendations and the draft of decision document resulting. So mo niya ha, it might result na ang imo bang project providan i-approve ba siya, so tagaan ka og ECC. If dili ka required mag-produce of ECC and nakita na ang imong project description, so tagaan lang ka og certificate of non-coverage, or if na-reject gid ang imong ECC, ang imong EIS, then denial letter. Okay? When approved, a covered project is issued a certificate of ECC for an application of CNC. So the regulated part of EIA review is limited to the process within EMB control. Kini ha, isa po ning very important point, no, na ang review process sa EIA should not be influenced by certain group persons, especially the proponent. Okay, ang review process wala gyud makabuot wala pwede manghilabot, either political or even ang kanang siyempre ang proponent mismo, di siya pwede manghilabot during review process. So it's the EMB nga na full control during this process. So after decision making, if kitagaan siya, then monitoring, validation, and evaluation audit. So at this stage, assesses the performance of the proponent kung iya bang gi-implement tanan nga mga stipulations niya dito sa environmental management plan. So iya bang yung gi-implement tanang mga interventions niya para ma-address ang impacts. Mo na ang certain project certain process. So siguro mag-enter dire. And then next meeting, mahuman naman tayo next meet. Yeah, mahuman tayo gamay naman lang. Next meeting, I will explain to you all the kining mga processes na involved during kining mga scoping, and then yeah, a more detailed discussion sa katong nga mga murag generic man guni kining nga process. Mao lang ning overall na process, pero within this daghang kay activities nga gakahitabo. Okay? So ato ni siyang i-explain next meeting. So mag-end sa tadara, and then naba mo question? Si Hani? Trisha, Erica,
Wala ko, sir.
Ivy,
Wala po, sir.
Ivy.
Ay, sir,
Wala, sir.
kanang,
Yeah.
sir, naka-decide na mo, sir, nga, by group na ang EIA ka, sir.
Actually, wala pa yun. Nagkulat ko, actually, pud na mag-meeting. Okay, busy kayo lang schedule. Ako, pag ito na ako ang schedule. Wala pa yun may naka-meeting. So, I don't know kung kano sa but ang after mo discuss na ako kay si Sir Lowell. So, basig before magsabot na ni. Ang kwan kay if dapat ihatag na sa inyo earlier, magod karon prepare mo at least. Dayon makakuan mo sa activities. So, mag-update lang ko ninyo, ha?
Okay, sir.
Sige, thank you. We'll end there, and then kuan din ako nga manual, yung pasas na ako nga inyo ni basahon nga ako na ning gi-download, gi-upload dito. Tanawon ninyo, naara diri tanan atong giistoryahan. So mas matun-an ninyo ayo ang EIA process if you read this manual. Mubo ra man siya, 57 pages lang siya nga fan. So ang kini nga manual, this is revised procedural manual for DAO 2003, DAO 3 series of 2003 sa implementing rules and regulations on PD 1586 or the environmental impact statement system. Okay, Presidential Decree 1586 mo na siya ang PEISS. Okay? So naadiri tanan katong details sa atong giistoryahan. So katong including the process, unsay scope sa EIA, sa EIS, unsay naa dapat sa imong EIS document, unsa katong mga categorization, itong mga environmentally critical areas. So all the details na atong di-discuss na adire. So please go over kini nga material because this will really help you mas masabtan ninyo ang EIA at the same time. If magbuhat na mo sa inyong EIS na document, kasabot na mo sa inyong ginabuhat. Okay? So, sige. We'll end there and then meeting. Yan, sige. Okay, so last meeting, we have continued our discussion sa kining mga parts, various projects that are categorization of projects sa PEIS na SS na system. And then we have also talked about the decisions on EIA applications, parts of the ECC, validity and expiry, and then of course the importance of public participation in the EIA preparation. So also we have started the discussion on the stages on the EIA process. So we have talked about katong kinilang medyo more of a generic na summary or generic na process on how EIA will be implemented or how the environmental impact statement system shall be conducted. So from screening, scoping to EIA study report preparation, decision making, and monitoring and evaluation and audit. But this one is more of a generic, it's more of like an overview lang sa process because a lot of things are actually happening in each of the component. So this afternoon, we'll have to look into those more details about this project, about the EIA process. So diri gyapon ta on the stages on the EIA process, but we'll look into a more specific details. Okay? So we will start with scoping. Yan. So the PowerPoint, kini na yung makikita karon will explain to you the flow chart of the ECC application. Sige, pasabot sa ECC Luigi. Luigi, napakada Luigi.
Sir, wala ko last time, sir.
Yeah, unsay pasabot gali sa ECC, kanang ECC na application. Apply ka og environmental compliance certificate. Okay? So, walang uban. So, environmental compliance certificate. So, we'll have to look into the specific details there sa the flow of the application of ECC. So, let's start with kining scoping. Yeah. Sige. So, scoping. Scoping starts first with the social preparation or the IEC, or IEC means Information and Education Campaign. Sige, Lester.
Sir,
Basahagan ni Dere Lester.
sir,
Sige.
Information, Education, and Communication, IEC of LGUs. So with jurisdiction over the project area is required, proponent-driven activity used as a basis for identification of stakeholders and issues in preparation for public scoping. Prior to IEC, tentative impact areas need to be determined by the proponent. Guidelines for which are provided in Annex 2, Annex 2, Annex 22. Stakeholders, -2. Stakeholders can be identified with LGU assistance using the proforma guideline or form in Annex 2-3. So the actual LGU IEC activities and outcome can be summarized using Annex 2-4. Note, so projects in national waters outside any LGU jurisdiction are not covered by IEC requirement for scoping purposes.
Okay. Sige. Thank you, Lester. So, kato, the first step is social preparation. So, unsay gakahitabo dere as read by Lester, it is a proponent-driven na activity. Therefore, kung kinsa to ang mag-implement sa project katong tag-iya na ga-plan nga mag-start og isa ka project, whether with an foundation, whether a pulp and paper industry or whatever type of industry, what he needs to do is to first inform the public about the project. Okay, so with the help of the LGU or the local government units, the proponent will identify who are the specific stakeholders. When you say stakeholders, they are the ones who are directly impacted by the project. So they should, so they are the ones who would respond to any issues na ma-generate sa isa ka undertaking. So that's why sila ang dapat ma-inform. Okay? So also at the same time, the proponent also will determine unsa to ang mga possible impact na with the project. Murag draft lang na identification na unsay possible na may tabo if i-implement ka na siya nga project. So more of at this stage, the social preparation, you are trying to inform the public. That's why this one is an information, education, and communication. So IEC. So what you're trying to do here is that you are informing the public about your intent to implement a project and also try to provide them the possible impacts that the project will do. And at the same time, you would also possibly get what are the, we would also allow them to at least think about kung unsa pud ang mga type of impact na possibly ma-generate sa isa ka project at their own perspective. Okay? So muna ang gakahitabo ani sa social preparation na process. So again, this is a proponent driven. Therefore, ang owner sa project will be the one who will lead the information of the public referring to the undertaking na he intends to do. So what happens after social preparation is request for scoping with Environmental Management Bureau. Sige, Catherine.
Catherine,
Sir,
sige, basahan yung scoping diri sa 1.2.
scoping is a required activity for PEIS and EIS-based projects. The proponent submits to the EMB 5 sets of pro forma letter of request for scoping annex a project description for scoping annex 2 to 6 with supporting docs. A filled out EIA coverage and requirement screening checklist. Annex 2 to 1 that assess areas per Annex 2-2. Stakeholder ID form Annex 2-3 and summary IEC documentation Annex -4 and E filled out scoping portion of the appropriate EIA's scoping procedural screening checklist or Annexes 2-7B. Note, attachments C and D are not required for projects in national waters outside any LGU jurisdiction.
Right. Thank you, Pat. So, at this stage, kining 1.2, ni request for scoping with EMD, it is still a proponent-driven activity, but it's like the proponent is asking the permission of EMB to conduct a formal na scoping. Okay? Dili pa gid ni mao ang scoping na process kining kakahitabo sa 1.2, including kaning 1.1. The 1.1 is like a social preparation, preparatory pa lang, identifying kung kinsa ang mga stakeholders and informing them about the project. In the 1.2, before you actually conduct the scoping, you need to ask the permission of EMB or the Environmental Management Bureau. Dili pwede nga si proponent lang ang mag-scoping, ma-invalid na siya. So sayang sa kwarta, sayang sa gasto. So the proponent shall ask the permission of the EMB to conduct scoping, submitting also kini nga mga documents. Okay? Itong letter of request for scoping, pro forma project description, because as you know, the EMB will form a technical working group who will also participate in the scoping na process to assure na legitimate ang activity. Okay? Assure na wala gasabot-sabot or clear din nga gi-conduct gid ang scoping na process. Okay? Mo nagakahitabo diri sa 1.2. Mananghid si proponent kay EMB na mag-conduct siya og scoping. Next, 1.3. Shehani? So in the 1.3, this review team formation, scheduling of 3-level scoping activity. Sige. Shehani, basahan yung 1.3.
Within 5 working days from receipt of letter request, EMB forms the prospective review team. Annex 2-8 presents criteria guidelines for selection of EIA, RC, and resource person. In coordination with the proponent, EMB confirms the date and venue of the 3-level scoping activity. The review team consists of an EMB case handler, third-party EIA, RC members, and or resource persons.
Okay. Thank you, Shehani. EIARC is Environmental Impact Assessment Review Committee. Review committee na sila. So these are technical persons or group of experts that is tapped by the EMB, Environmental Management Bureau, to evaluate the project. So ina na siya. So what happens in the 1.3 based sa katong basa ni Shehani is that the EMB upon receiving the application there is a 1.2, ang application ni proponent to conduct a scoping, upon receiving that, the EMB will form the prospective review team. Mao na niyang EIARC. Ano siya? They are the review team. So i-form niya ang review team together with the EMB case handler, and third-party ERC and or resource person. Okay? So, mao ni ang response ni EMB once ma-accept niya ang application for scoping. So, after that, pwede na dayon mag-conduct og scoping. And ang scoping na process is not a one-time na process. Okay? Dili siya So, we have a 3-level na scoping. Okay? So, what happens in the, mao na ni ang actual gig na scoping. Okay? What happens in the conduct of 3-level scoping is that 3-level scoping activity is a proponent-driven activity, preferably done one at a time, on-site, or in the region of project location. Remember ha? So, asa pwede buhaton na or asa preferably dapat buhaton ang 3-level na scoping. One time, on-site, or in a region of project location. Okay? So, there are 3 process or there are 3 levels. One is project briefing, second, public scoping, third is technical scoping with the review team. By the way, unsa day ang gusto mahibalaan sa scoping na process? Unsa ganito? Isa gusto mag-share? Kasi na last week. Si Hani, naam ka last week, no? Si Hani? Unsa ganito ang
Sir.
unsa ganito ang ginabuhat sa scoping? Unsay gusto mahibalaan sa scoping?
Determine the focus term of preference, sir.
Yeah, term of preference or another term you are referring to that TOR, ba?
Yes, sir.
Terms of reference. The TOR sa project or the EIA study. Or in other words, dina-determine actually kung unsa dito ang mga impact na possibly ma-influence sa project, and including kung unsaon nila o unsa ang mga possible na impacts, and also unsaon na o possibly address sa proponent. So but sa diri lang gina-determine na gid ang terms of reference because as I've said in the last meeting, posible daghan kayo og ipang-ingon ang mga tao kung unsa ang possible na impact, but some of which may not happen or impossible na mahitabo. So that's why as 3-level scoping will help the proponent i-focus kung asa gito ang pinaka-important nga mga impacts na dapat niya ma-address. So nana ang ginabuhat sa scoping ha. And we are doing that in a 3-level na process. So first is project briefing with the review team. Okay? Ang review team composed of ito, case handler, EMB case handler, third-party EIA RC members, and or resource person. So at project briefing muna sila, during which the proponent or ang owner sa study presents a project overview, key issues, and proposed terms of reference of the study. So that's why si proponent would identify first before siya mag-conduct sa scoping, naapod siya initial assessment kung unsa to ang mga possible impacts na mahitabo because of the project na iyang i-implement. So therefore, maghimo na si proponent og murag proposal for proposed TOR, mga proposed terms of reference of EIA study. Kana din siya ang either dungagan or kuan or most probably dungagan in the next na mga levels of scoping process. So the proponent will present the proposed TOR of the study. So based on the pre-filled out of SPSC and RT may initially raise key issues of the scope of EIA study subject to the public and technical scoping. So what happens again in level 1, or in level 1 of scoping, the proponent will conduct a project briefing with the review team. Manin niyo ha. So the review team, which is composed of the technical persons appointed by the Environmental Management Bureau, who will oversee the scoping na process. So, manang kita po, project briefing. Second is public scoping. So, in the public scoping na process, the proponent is doing this with the project stakeholders. Kinsa na ng project, with the oversight also of the technical or the review team. Okay, dapat na oversight ang review team. So the public scoping with the project stakeholders. Stakeholders, the community, the LGU, tribal leaders if present, na indigenous people in the site. So those are the possible stakeholders. So during which community sectors raise their issues to be addressed in the EIA study.
So because at this level, the community has already some idea kung unsa ang possible na impact of the study. Okay, impact of the undertaking. So nana na sila idea considering that if you have really implemented kining IEC, kining social preparation. So that's why very important ang social preparation. Wherein you are informing the public kung unsa ang project na imong intent nga itukod. And then you provide them with months or days before you conduct the actual public scoping. Then they have already some idea kung unsa to ang mga issues na dapat ma-address sa inyong sa proponent. So during this public scoping, this is done with the project stakeholders. A pro forma public scoping program's guidelines is presented to guide the proponent in preparation and conduct of scoping. So kana siya. After public scoping, then another scoping process, the level 3 is the technical scoping with the review team. Okay? Kung manamo sa community of scoping, after that, you proceed with the technical scoping with the review team. So during which the EIA SPSC presented by the proponent during the project briefing is reviewed, finalized, okay, finalized and signed by the RT and the proponent. So the RT is also referred to for environmental risk categorization and ERA format coverage. So a guidance on segregation of other government requirements of the EIA scope. Okay. So what happens here is that i-present ni proponent kung unsa to ang output sa public scoping sa review team. And then, si review team will finalize and sign the output of the scoping together with the proponent. If okay na sa ila. There might be cases na mag-add si review team. Okay? Mag-add sila og mga possible impacts na dapat ma-address. Then if okay na in the review team together with the public, okay na sa ila, then the review team will sign now the scoping na document together with the proponent. So officially, human na ninyo ang scoping na process. So, human na sa dere, okay? After that, you submit na the scoping, the final approval of the scoping checklist. So, pag okay na siya, so the EMB chief reviews and approves the EIA SPSC, rendering official the final terms of reference of the EIA study. Okay? Mo ni ang kakahitabo. So, pag the output there is a third level na scoping, ang output sa review team nag-signan niya sa review team together with the proponent kung mauni ang terms of reference based on the public scoping, then the EMB chief will review and then approve na kato na terms of reference of the EIA study. Now, your terms of reference now will become the basis kung unsa nga mga data ang imong panguwaon diri sa EIA study and report preparation. Okay? The scoping na process kanina diri sa flowchart, our first level na scoping process, including kaning 3 levels na scoping, are just preparations pa lang. Okay, nana ka tedious ang activity. So there are only preparations before you can immediately conduct the EIA study and report preparation. So dili insigida. Okay? Dili insigida na when you have a project, nagplano ka mag-conduct of project, insigida maghimo na kag EIA study. That's wrong. That's not on the proper framework of the PEISS. So what happens is that first you conduct a formal na scoping following the rules. Okay, following the policy na guides. Pag nana ang output, which is a terms of reference, then that would be your basis dito sa imong i-conduct na EIA study and report preparation. Okay? Sige. Luigi.
Sir.
Basahan yung 2.0. Okay.
So this step is wholly within the proponent's control. Proponents undertakes the EIA study with the assistance of its EIA preparer team. DNR EMB personnel may be clarify procedural and technical matters on the EIA process, but is not allowed to take part in the EIA study or in the preparation of the report. EIS, PEP, RMP, and EPRMP are present in Annex 2 to 11 to 214 Annex 4 the
Luigi,
preparation.
Luigi.
Sir.
Yeah, okay na to. Maski dira lang taman. Kining diri sa outline content EIA naani sa form ha katong i-forward na ko nga document kanang mga annexes nga na-mention ninyo ganiha. All those annexes are found sa katong manual na provide na ko sa inyo ha. So you can just check kana nga mga forms. So in that, thank you Luigi. So in the 2.0, so the proponent ha, ang owner sa project will tap an EIA preparer team, a technical team who will conduct the EIA study. So pag-conduct nila sa EIA study, then they are the one who will get all those data sets na, let's say for example, if biodiversity, water quality, soil condition, etc. So kana nga mga data sets. So they will conduct the baseline information, including the preparation of environmental management plan. Okay? Tanan-tanan. So, buhaton na din. Diri ang formal na EIA preparation and study. So, preparing katong tanan contents sa EIS na document na discuss nato before. Okay? But remember this, the Environmental Management Bureau personnel are not allowed, okay? Are not allowed to take part in the EIA study or in the preparation of report because that is conflict of interest. Okay? You cannot approve something na ikaw ra pod ang nagtabang og himo. Okay? Because mura na og kuana walay delikadesa, okay? So that's conflict of interest. So it is emphasized here na tanang members of the EMB, Environmental Management Bureau, should not participate or take part in the EIA study na buhaton sa proponent. Sa proponent ra na with the EIA preparer na iyang gitap para walay issues na ma-generate later with that activity. So inana nga kahitabo diri sa 2.0 nga level. So mag-conduct na sa EIA study. So when you are done with the EIA report na ang EIS na document, then that document will now be reviewed and evaluated. So first is procedural screening of EIA report. So in the 3.1, so proponent submits one copy of EIA report and filled out procedural screening form of the SPSC Annex 727A. So within 3 days from the receipt of the EIA report, the screening officer validates the procedural screening by the proponent. So non-conforming document will be returned. So remember the officer validates the procedural screening by the proponent, meaning ni-follow bagid siya sa process on the preparation of EIA. So mo nang kakitabo diri sa 3.1. So proponent will also be instructed to pay the filing fee, set up the review fund, and then show the receipt to the EMB case handler to initiate the processing of the document. Mo nang ginatabo din. After that, magbayad siya, and then submission of procedurally accepted documents. So those are the activities nga gakahitabo diri nga level. So basically, at this 3.0 nga level, si proponent will submit now the EIS na document kay EMB together with the attachment and payments. So at this level, at 4.0 nga level, katong 3.0 gisubmit ni proponent ha, gisubmit kay EMB and gibayran si EMB. Gibayran siya with referring to katong mga filing fee and review fund. So at this stage of 4.0, wala na i-appeal si proponent. So proponent cannot intervene in all activities associated diri sa 4.0 na level. Okay? Because here, only the EMB or the Environmental Management Bureau has the control on all activities na mahitabo beyond diri nga level. So first is substantive review. Okay? Substantive review. So the EMB now, or the DNR, will be given enough time for them to review the environmental impact statement nga gi-prepare sa kato nga proponent. So reconvening of the review team and distribution of EIA report copies to the review team. So this review team are actually the same katong review team nga naa dito sa scoping na process. Okay? There is a technical scoping, di ba? There is a review team formation nga ay mga experts or group of people that will be tapped by the EMB to serve as the review team. So they will return here after scoping, wa naman to sila appeal. So after nag-conduct og scoping, naka-perma na sila sa terms of reference, wala na sila ilabot, si proponent na lang conducting the EIA study. Now, those review team will return there is a 4.1. So of course, the name itself, review team. So they will evaluate now the environmental impact statement document prepared by the proponent. If that actually pass sa mga standards. So review proper by the review team, ang kakitabo dere, that would be given enough time for them to review each of the submissions of the proponent. So first, review team meeting. So at this 4.2.1, EMB can pre-select the EIA/RC chair, otherwise the EIA/RC members can select its chair. Okay? So murag katong mga members sa review team will now conduct a meeting for them to discuss about sa katong project. So managkitabo dire. So first review meeting, another site visit, public consultation, or public hearing. Okay? In the public participation during review na nata sa review stage, and again at this stage only the DNR EMB will be liable now, will be the one who would function. So site visit for each type of EIS document. This one is a programmatic environmental impact statement. Environmental impact statement, P is same programmatic environmental review and management plan. So EPRMP. Let's check again the one. Hindi na ako ma-memorize. EPRMP. Yeah, environmental performance report and management plan. So this one are actually submitted for those existing facilities, whether they have performed with regards to the implementation of katong environmental management plan nila. Okay, so the environmental performance report and management plan. So tingnan niyo ha. So programmatic environmental performance report and management plan, or environmental performance report and management plan. Okay? For site visit by the review team at this level, at this type of mga requirements is a must. Except for the optional, there is a management plan. Public hearing is a must, and public consultation is not required for programmatic but required in the ES. Will be required if public hearing is waived due to the absence of significant amounts of opposition, okay, and written request for the public hearing, both based on the valid concerns with the DNR EMB mandate. Okay. So offshore projects are not covered by site visit, public consultation, and public hearing offshore. Okay. And if there are no residents on site, no communities deriving livelihood from the site, and project area outside any LGU jurisdiction. So meaning walay community nga directly impacted by the project. Okay. So that's what happened here in the 4.2.2. So si review team, nakatong na-address sa first review team meeting, they will conduct a site visit, public consultation, and public hearing depending on the type of the level of the project. Then the process will proceed to the second and third review team meeting. So as same with the other activities, they would provided enough time for the technical review team to conduct the assessment sa katong ilang submit nga report. Now, after that, in the 4.2.4, the Environmental Impact Assessment Review Committee report by ERC Chair. So responses will provide a report will submit a report about their evaluation on the project. So responses must include the issues raised by the stakeholders, the ERC during the site visit, public hearing, and all consultation. So, okay. So this at this level, it's more of a review na lang, including here, review by the EMB about the project. So you can just go over na lang. So after that, if the environmental if the review team will find the project fit, then they will endorse positively to the EMB. I-endorse nila nga okay ang project, pass siya with the EIA na policy. But if not, they will still endorse, suggesting a denial letter sa kana nga organization, kana nga proponent. So ma-off ang kining Zoom meeting. Okay. So let's continue. So after the Environmental Impact Assessment Review Team, itong RT, will find the project na either fit or not to be issued by the ECC, to be issued by an ECC. What happens is that they will endorse or provide a recommendation to the they will endorse that to the EMB director. Okay, and then what happens is that the EMB now will decide whether they are going to issue a decision document and what type of document will be provided na with to the proponent. So it's either providan sila og denial letter that would tell na therefore they have not prepared or the review team has find na dili nila ma-address katong mga issues and concerns na na-raise na based sa terms of reference, or they might be awarded an ECC allowing them to proceed on the project. Then after this, sa diri nga level, then if maka-accept na og if ECC ang ihatag, environmental compliance certificate sa proponent, then what happens is i-transmit to nga ECC to the concerned local government authority, mga LGUs, for the proponent to acquire other permits necessary sa iyang project. Okay? So inana siya ang gakaitabo ha. Sa to'y una nga process kani, mag-conduct siya og scoping. Okay? Scoping, nag-social preparation, mag-request siya og scoping sa request for scoping with the EMB. Human si EMB, providean siya og review team. And then, mag-conduct sila sa 3-level na scoping. Then, pag okay na ang scoping process, na clear, na approve na terms of reference, then, i-perform na ang EIA study and i-prepare na ang report or the environmental impact statement na document. So, after that, i-submit na ang document kang EMB. Kung nakakitabo diri, submit kay EMB ang document. Then, si EMB will tap again katong review team, katong EIA RT or RC or review committee or review team. So, i-tap to siya again for them to reconvene and discuss whether the terms of reference based on the scoping process were complied on the EIS na document. So now, after that, si review team will conduct site visit, public consultation, and public hearing. And then after that, maghatag sila dayon og recommendation, and then right after, mag-decide dayon si EMB whether tagaan sila, issuehan sila sa ECC or tagaan sila og denial letter.
Then, si EMB dayon i-forward na, i-transmit katong if ECC ang ma-forward, then i-transmit na nila nga ECC to concerned government agencies and LGUs for the proponent to acquire other permits nga necessary para sa iyang project. Okay, na siya ha. But not all projects are required to produce an EIA. So, that's why naapo tayo ginatawag og IEE. So, maadto sa ta, na ako'y gi-forward sa inyong classroom kaganiha nga kanto siya guidelines which would help you understand more sa kining policy sa EIA. Makita na ninyo ang PDF, kining revised guidelines for coverage screening and standard requirements.
Sir.
Sige. So, in this document, 36 pages naman nun nga document. So, makita ni mo diri, you will get enough information, including the definition of terms, no? Define diri ang certificate of non-coverage, co-located project, environmental compliance certificate, environmentally critical area, okay? So, inyo na siya, you can familiarize that. And then, katong giistoryahan na to atong mga niagi, atong categorization, category A, category B, category C, category D, and then categorization katong mga environmentally critical projects with description, okay? Because ikatong manual nga ipakita nako atong niagi, naka-enlist lang ni siya in tabulation, in table. Pero in this manual naa siya mga description. So non-ferrous metal industry. So non-ferrous metals shall refer to organize and coordinate arrangement of process designed to prepare smelt process of recycled non-ferrous metals into marketable products. Okay? So forestry projects, okay? When you say forestry projects, nga considered as environmentally critical, so forestry projects shall refer to projects involving the extraction, okay? Manin nyo ha, extraction, harvesting, and or processing of timber and other forest products on a commercial scale. Okay, commercial scale ha, so dinaghan. So extraction, harvesting, and processing of timber and other. Therefore, maski kawayan, mga resins, but at a commercial level. So mas dinaghan. So all these are considered as critical projects. So but this is not my point here nganong gidala ta mo diri, but instead diri sa last page. But still you go over sa kining document ha. So diri nga page kini. So kining Annex A project thresholds for coverage screening and categorization. So as I've said kaganiha, dili tanang projects are required to produce an EIA. Okay? So not all projects should produce an EIA. Even though naagay uban projects nga dili na siya kinahanglan mag-EIA katong mag-acquire lang og certificate of non-coverage. But naapoy certain projects nga gagmay ra kayo sila para i-comply og EIA. Okay? Gagmay ra kayo ang ilang activity undertaking para ipabuhat pa sila og EIA because nakita ninyo ang preparation sa EIS na document katong atong discuss ganihang flow chart. As you can see, unsa ka tedious to nga process, di ba? From scoping level, from public consultation, from information and education and communication to the public, up to the final approval and issuance of ECC, taas kay ito nga process and that is costly. Okay, gasto. The EIA report preparation in itself is a very costly nga undertaking. So that's why dili tanang projects required to produce an EIA, especially kung gagmay ang projects. So in this table, you will see kung unsa to ang mga projects nga based on capacity or based on production. So they are categorized into what projects dapat nila ma-produce. Okay? But na certain quantity. All those projects that are placed in those projects that are environmentally critical projects. So EIS gito sila. Okay? Ang ilang i-produce. Environmental impact statement gito nga document. But na certain projects po diri na they are non-environmentally critical. Okay? Non-environmentally critical projects because it's either ang category B, ang category A, gibutang sila sa environmentally critical projects, either gibutang sila or wala sa critical area. Si category B, non-environmentally critical projects pero gibutang sa environmentally critical area. Okay? Kadumdum mo atong categorization. So, remember ha, sa category A, kana siya, those are environmentally critical projects that are placed in environmentally critical area. So that's why na EIS nga requirement dire for environmental impact statement na document. Category B, these are non-environmentally critical projects that are placed in environmentally critical area. Okay? Kining category A, maski ibutang sila sa critical area or dili sila ibutang sa critical area, still required sila aning EIS. But sa kaning category B, non-environmentally critical projects man sila, ibutang sila sa critical area, pero ang ubang projects na ay gagmay lang nga capacity, gagmay nga production. So dili sila i-require og inana ka dako nga EIA na EIS na document. So we'll go over some example. Sige, dili ta magsugod kining non-ferrous metal industries and iron and steel mills. So in category A, those projects that are producing more than 30,000 metric tons, okay, required na sila og EIA. So ang category B, those projects that are producing if sa category B, if mo produce sila og more than 10,000 metric tons but lesser than 30 metric tons, then required sila og EIS. But if ang production lang ana nga industry is lesser than 10,000, okay, from 200 metric tons lang to from 200 metric tons lang to lesser than 10,000 metric tons. So, of course, required lang sila og initial environmental examination. There are also some projects that are not covered by the EIA, itong mga nasa category D. So, if lesser than 200 metric ton lang annually, so ginagmay lang na projects. So, they will be issued with certificate of non-coverage. But if inani, so of course, required sila of either IEE or an EIS na document. Sige, muadto ta sa mga forestry na projects. Forestry. Habang forestry dali. Iron, petroleum, smelting, chemical, agriculture, food, other manufacturing, glass, mining and quarrying projects. Tara, kini. Forestry projects. Sige. Forestry projects. Na 2.2.1 diri, community-based forest resource utilization, CBFRU, integrated IFMA, kadugdong mo ng Integrated Forest Management Agreement, TLA or Timber License Agreement, private land timber utilization, and other forestry project co-managed with DNR. Okay? Ano sa sila required og EIA, EIS and IEE? So, if category A sila, environmentally critical project sila, either ibutang sila sa environmentally critical area or not, if ang production nila is more than 10,000 cubic meter, then required sila og EIS na document. If ang production nila, if category B sila ha, category B sila, non-environmentally critical project sila because of lower nga production rate, pero gibutang sila sa environmentally critical area, if ang production nila is lesser than 10,000 cubic meter but more than 5,000 cubic meter, required sila gyapon og EIS. Pero if ang production nila is from 100 cubic meter to 500 cubic meters lang, then ang requirement lang nila is an initial environmental na examination. Okay? Gets ninyo? Kuha ninyo? Based on production rate na ha.
production rate. So for the forestry project, I think this one is a daily na production of timber. So, okay. Project size parameter remarks. Annual volume. No, not a daily. Annual day. Yearly. Annual volume of trees to be cut. Okay. So if more than 10,000 cubic meter ang i-cut nila, so considered na siya nga environmentally critical project. So category A. So required of EIA. If lesser than 10,000, non-ECP na sila, non-environmentally critical project. Pero more than 5,000 ang ilang production and naa sila sa environmentally critical area, so required sila EIS. IEE lang kung more than 100 cubic meter but lesser than 5,000 cubic meter. If lesser than 100 cubic meter, then that is a category D nga project. Okay? So, I want you to go over sa kini nga especially katong mga related lang sa forest-based na industry. Like mining, okay? Mga mining, mga sabana nga mga projects diya. Yeah, so i-go over lang sa mga projects, quarrying, mga relationship with the forestry projects. Okay? So, kato siya ha. Nagets ba to ninyo? Uy, duha naman lang din ni. Lester, si Hani.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, i-go over to ninyo ha. Katong document, familiarize katong mga, especially katong mga related sa forestry projects. Asa dapit ato ang required lang og EIA, asa ato ang required lang og IEE. Okay? Di na mo balibog kung mayong kog environmentally critical project o environmentally critical area. Nasabtan na ninyo? Lester? Kani? Janisa?
Ibog sa gamay, sir. Pero,
Yep, balik-balikon lang siguro og familiarize. Libogin na siya. Mas ako malibog ko nila usay but balik-balikon lang siya og familiarize para di na mo mawala sunod pag mag-discuss ana ha. Sige. Sige. So, let's go back sa katong kwan. Now, how about if ang requirement lang nila is IEE, okay? Initial environmental examination lang, dili na full-blown na EIA, ba? Kung ato yung mga certain projects ganiha nga na-mention dito sa tabulation nga they are not required to produce a full environmental impact assessment. So these are the activities na involved sa IEE na application. One is informal scoping. So, and optional siya for the proponent. So, the proponent may opt to request EMB to scope the IER. In the scoping meeting, the proponent and EMB jointly fill the scoping checklist. The accomplished may be signed by both parties serve as official TOR and IER. But this one is a option of the proponent. Okay? Mag-informal scoping ba siya? Next level is EIA study and report preparation. Okay? Sa kini nga case, sa initial environmental examination, naay mo checklist. Let's say, for example, ang industry kay sawmill. Naay certain checklist nga appropriate para sa sawmill nga industry. Okay, let's say quarrying, for example, small scale na quarry. Naay certain EIA nga checklist, ay IEE dahil initial environmental examination nga checklist nga fit para ana nga undertaking. Okay, naay mo prepare ana, you can makita lang niyo actually sa internet or sa DNR. Naapoy standard format. Na standard format sa initial environmental examination. Mura ra ni siya checklist. Mag-check ra gid na magkalans na prone ba siya sa water pollution, check or not. So check nimo tong not, nana lang. So mas dali ni siya compared sa EIA. Ang IEE. So after that, so i-report EIA report review dayon ang inyong initial environmental examination report by the EMB. So setting up a review fund, submission of procedurally accepted application documents. So right here, in the same way with the EIA, so sumusulod si EMB. So invite ni EMB ang reviewers and distribution of EIA or IEE reports.
that will be given enough time for them to review. So the EMB will properly review now your IEE, Initial Environmental Examination na document. So still, same with the IEE, mag-conduct yapon sila og site visit and public consultation, but they will not conduct a public hearing. So no public hearing is required sa EMB for an IEE, for an Initial Environmental Examination. And then, so review, continuation na siya sa review. And then, in the same way, i-endorse sa review team and then mag-decide tayo ng EMB kung tagaan siya o approval. Tagaan o ECC, Environmental Compliance Certificate. And then, same way, transmit to the ECC to concern GAs and LGUs. So, yun na ang process ha. So, sa IEE, mas simpler siya. You can just go over aning steps sa kuan. How about if certificate of non-coverage? So, kano sa ganini? If ang project, like for example, naa siya sa category D. So, dili siya environmentally critical na project, wala pagid siya sa critical area. So, therefore, ang kwaon niya is certificate of non-coverage. So, what are the process? So, mo ni, mag-submit si proponent o project description sa EMB. Okay? This step is wholly within the proponent's control. So the proponent or si owner undertakes an EIA study. Murag short lang ni nga study, murag dili gyud siya actual nga EIA with or without the assistance of EIA preparer. Murag graph lang ni nga study describing kung unsa ang project and possible impact. So the DNR-MB personnel may clarify procedural and technical matters on the EIA process but is not allowed to take part on the EIA. So human, the project description report by the proponent will be submitted to the EMB for procedural screening. So, in the same way, i-review gyapon ni EMB kung sakto ba nga certificate of non-coverage lang gyud ang iyang kinahanglan paon. So, optional ang site visit. So, mag-draft og recommendation documents by EMB. And then, endorsement recommendation, sign off, and then tagaan siya og certificate of non-coverage if ang project yun is dili gyud siya covered sa PEISS. So na ang kasayon sa ang kining certificate of non-coverage na application. So monitoring, validation, evaluation, and audit procedures. So all those things na all those very tedious na process sa EIA, all those mga nakita na encounter ninyo ng mga terminologies, tabulations, etc. relating sa kanyang PEISS system will be in vain or will be just nothing if there will be no monitoring, validation and evaluation / audit process. So nganong kinahanglan siya? Nganong kinahanglan mag monitoring? Nganong kinahanglan ang validation? Nganong evaluation and audit? Anong kinahanglan siya? Basically, it is to ensure the judicious implementation of sound environmental management. Remember, si proponent naa siya'y ECC, Environmental Compliance Commitment. Meaning, committed siya na i-implement niya tanang na indicate niya dito sa environmental management plan. So therefore, dapat i-evaluate pod, i-validate pod, i-monitor, i-validate, and i-evaluate si proponent kung iya ba gid tong gi-implement during sa iyang start sa project. So project compliance with the conditions set in the ECC, meet ba, project na comply ba ang tanang na naka-indicate sa environmental management plan sa iyang EIS na document, effective ba kini gyud, effective ba ang katong environmental measures on prevention and mitigation of actual project impact vis-a-vis the predicted impact used as a basis for EMP design. Because for example, dili di ay effective. So therefore, kinahanglan mo himo og paagi si proponent na ma-address na niya. Then continual updating of EMP for sustained responsive of a projected operation and project impact. Mo ni dapat responsive ang imong EIA, ang imong EIS na document, because there might be some cases na dili ma-prevent ang kato nga mga impact. So pwede nimo siya i-update. So kini ang mga terms nga dapat ma-comply ha, nga i-check sa DNR kung na-comply ba ni sa proponent during sa actual start sa iyang project operations, construction phase to the decommissioning phase. Kung ni-comply ba siya sa naa sa ECC niya. And then what if dili niya buhaton? Especially like for example kanang mga minahan, di ba? Daghang kay mga hugaw nga mga lubog ang mga tubig. So what if dili nila mabuhat na ang katong tanang ilang promise nga naa sa ECC? So the ECC may be suspended for violation of proponents to comply with the conditions. So authority to impose fines and penalties. So the director of the EMB Central Office of the Regional Office may impose fines and penalties. And the worst case is cease and desist order. Pahunungon yun. So if based on violations under the PEIS system, if wala yun na meet ni proponent ang katong tanang naka-indicate sa iyang ECC, then therefore, an cease and desist order might be issued, telling them na ipahunong ang tanang operation. Okay? Mao na ang pamaagi ha. So, pwede siya i-suspend if naa siya na-violate. Like same sa katong dati, katong sa mga minahan sa time ni Gina Lopez, ipa-suspend tanan. And if during suspension makita nga mas grabe ang impact, dili nila kaya ma-address, then isuhan sila og cease and desist order. If based on environmental laws, wala nila na comply. So next, ano lang siya. So scope of violations. Kanus-a sila possibly magka-failure ang isa ka proponent.
Excuse me, sir.
Yep.
Nag-share pa ka sa screen, sir?
Ay, dili niyo makita?
Dili, sir.
Kailangan, sorry.
Makita man, sir.
Siguro sa kay Erika. Kita ni mo, Erika?
Karon pa, sir.
Sige. So, kaganiha na ata diri. So, katong monitoring, validation, and evaluation. So, sa diri, gina-determine diri kung unsa to ang mga points nga dapat tan-awon pag-evaluate, pag-monitor, pag-validate, and evaluate sa isa ka project. Kung gi-implement bagid nila tanang naa sa ilang ECC. Remember, sa ECC, so itong naa sa ECC, naka-indicate sa ECC nila kung unsa to ang mga list of conditions. Okay? ECC which list the conditions within the mandate of the EMB. Unsa to ang mga dapat nila ma-address, including the review committee nga recommendations. So naa na siya sa ECC. Unsa to unsa ang dapat nila ma-meet ni proponent. So go back lang ko. Nawala akong yan. So, anong nasa monitoring, validation, and evaluation. Then, if naay problem ang kana nga proponent, pwede sila taga-ag suspension if wala nila na-meet ang standards nga naka-indicate sa ilang ECC. So, pwede i-suspend ang ilang operation. Pahunungon kadali ang ilang operation if di sila kasunod. Pwede sila i-impose ang fines sa ila by the EMB director or the regional office, or the worst case is tagaan sila og cease and desist order. So pag cease and desist order, it indicates na nga pahunungon gyud ang ilang operations. And the worst case is pwede pa magkakasuhay, mapreso ang proponent or whatever na mga worst case scenario para sa inana nga undertaking. So scope of violation. So projects with or without ECC. Okay, nag-operate mo, wala mo environmental compliance certificate, that's a violation. Projects are established and are operating without an ECC. Okay? So, nagsugod mo trabaho and nag-operations na mo without an ECC, that's a violation. So matagaan you need cease and desist order. So violations on the conditions of ECC with all format. So conduct of studies and other conditions within the mandate of other agencies. So violations of conditions of ECC. So wala nimo gisunod kung tanan naka-indicate sa imong ECC. So projects violating ECC conditions
and environmental management plan commitments and other procedural requirements of the Philippine EIS system. Kini siya, violation ni. So it can be a minor or major. Minor, violations of administrative conditions in the ECC and the EIS system procedures. Let's say nanikas ka sa pag-develop, pag-implement sa imong EIA. And the major offenses is the violation substantive conditions in the ECC and the EIS system procedures, rules and regulations that will have significant impact on the environment. Pag kini ang makuha nimo, then automatically dili na gyud cease and desist order gyud automatic or pahunungon gyud ang operation. Then lastly, misrepresentation in the EIA report or any other EIA documents. Misrepresentation meaning wala ka naghatag og eksakto nga detalye sa imong EIA report and EIA documents. So that's a violation. Okay? So I think that was my last slide. So katuha ang scope of violation kanus-a ka matagaan og either suspension or cease and desist order. So wala kay ECC, nag-establish ka or nag-operate ka nga wala ECC, gi-violate nimo ang conditions nga naa sa imong environmental compliance certificate. So if nag-violate ka sa imong ECC conditions and EMP commitments, so it's either a minor or major offense. And if misrepresentation ng imong EIA report or any other documents, naghatag kag invalid na data, invalid na documents sa imong EIS na document. So that's all for the kining overview sa EIS na Philippine Environmental Impact Statement System. Na mo question? Shani, Saison, Lester, Erica, Janisa. Question.
Wala na, sir.
How about Erica? Shani,
Wala, sir.
Wala po, sir.
Janisa. Sure ha, wala question ha. So i-familiarize lang to ninyo para dili mo malibog ka ng mga ECAS, Environmentally Critical Area, Environmental Management Plan, kasagaran mga abbreviation, Non-Environmentally Critical Project, Environmentally Critical Project, mga Category A, Category B, Category C, Category D, na sila. Then, unsa ilang mga requirements? Required ba na sila EIA or IEE? So, kana sila. Then, familiarize the process. Okay? Especially the scoping. So, timanin yung maayong scoping. Sa kay tabo sa scoping, nganong importante ang scoping na process. Okay? Sige. If you don't have any question, naana ni nga PowerPoint dito sa classroom, including katong procedural manual. So, basahon to ninyo ha, katong procedural manual ha. Because all the points nga sa exams, etc. dito rakwaon. Okay? So, this is actually my last na discussion. Ang next na mag-discuss ninyo sa next meeting kay si Sir Luel Aribal for the assessment of biophysical conditions. More of dito na mo sa EIA preparation na topic. Sige. Since this is my last maghatag ko og quiz sa kini nga topic on Monday afternoon. Ha? So, kindly inform your classmates na nandayon. Sige. Shani?
Ay, sir, pwede ko mag-ask, sir? Kanang tomorrow, sir, unsay oras kuan si Sir Maki
9
sabang competency?
9 daw.
Gmeet, sir, or Zoom?
I think Google Meet kay
Ay, okay,
sa
sir.
Zoom. If na ay Google Meet ako musulod para mag-record. Well na siya. Ha?
Sige, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sige. So mag-quiz ta sa kini nga topic sa Monday. Mamawi mo kay gagmay magkuha sa katong previous na exam.
Sir, pila ka items?
Depende pa. Panahon pa nato kung pila ka book items may mo. Quiz kami. Ha? Sige, so
Sir, sayo na, sir.
basahon ninyo ha. Basahon lagi ito. Actually, dali lagi siya basta inyo lang ma-familiarize. So, gagmay magkuha atong niagin. Natingala ko nga, gagmay man sila kuha.
Lisod kayong statement, sir, oy.
Wala ninyo nasabtan siguro ayo. So, walang kinahanglan nyo magbasa. Familiarize ninyo ang kuhan. Lagi pang tweak ko raman to gamay. Para murag true pero dili di ay. Sige, anyway. So, sige lang. Kaya mapasalagan ninyo ang katong next quiz. So, basta inyo tong studyhan. Especially katong manual. Ang masuggest gid nako not this PowerPoint but ni manual. Okay? Ang focus ninyo katong manual gid. Pag mabasa to ninyong manual, okay na gid kayo na.